Hello, everyone. Thank you guys so much for coming out today for the Resident Artist Talks with Stephanie Bursese, Nela Garzón, and Preetika Rajgariah. I'm going to quickly introduce the Artist Residency Program. So the program is designed to offer time and space for craft artists to focus on their creative work and interact with the public. The program supports emerging, mid-career, and established artists working in all craft media, including but not limited to clay, fiber, glass, metal, wood, and mixed media. I'm going to introduce Stephanie before you guys hear her talk. So, Stephanie Bursese is our interdisciplinary craft and photography resident in conjunction with the Houston Center for Photography. Stephanie Bursese is a Philadelphia-based multidisciplinary artist who has spent her life all along the East Coast, deeply embedded in many creative communities. Stephanie earned her MFA from Syracuse University and her BFA from the University of Florida, both in photography with minors in printmaking and art history. Her work has appeared in numerous group and solo exhibitions, publications, and museums nationally and internationally, including the Aperture Foundation in New York, the Print Center in Philadelphia, Expo Chicago in Illinois, and Cornell University, to name a few. She is represented in both private and public collections, and she was selected for a residency at the Fabric Workshop and Museum in 2006. She published her first book of photographs called Razor Thin, Rock Hard in 2013 and released a second book in 2015 called Belt and Brace and was nominated for the MAC First Book Award in 2017. Everyone, please welcome Stephanie.
Hello, everyone. Thank you to Zainab for moderating this talk, Natalie for organizing this event. I'm super grateful to the Craft Center mission for providing a context for us to all speak freely about our work today. My name is Stephanie Bursese. I live in Philadelphia and have been here in Houston for about 2.5 months. My residency is 3 months long, so I'll be here for just a couple of weeks. And this has been my first time in Houston, but not my first time in Texas. I'd like to start with a question that guides me in my art practice. How do we make meaning? Every artist develops their own question, an umbrella question, something that they work through and around in every creative practice they adopt. The evolutionary thread through my own visual art practice can be broken up into 3 stages: self, self and world, and self and system. For our time together today, instead of showing work from each of these stages, I'm going to talk about some past work that connects to the pieces hanging in my studio, and then explore the most current and emergent ideas. On the right, you'll see a page from my notebook outlining a talk I gave in 2019 at the Marble Hill Camera Club in Queens, a convenient outline for both the ideas and work I'll be bringing forward. The self, as it's often referred to in psychology, is where all of my work begins. By exploring certain specific facets of my identity and lived experience, I can tap into more universal patterns in human behavior, cultural history, and pressing social concerns. I believe photography is an inherently interdisciplinary practice. I like to say that I'm an artist who uses photography, and I move very fluidly between mediums and image-making processes. I see art making, teaching, organizing, collaborating, writing, and designing as all part of my creative practice, and I'm an artist who has chosen to work in the arts in exchange for a salary and to be around other artists. The history of craft and the history of photography are tightly wound around the history of feminism, needlework, and design. The title of this first piece is Sometimes It Gets Boring, and is about the process of healing after a breakup while you are resetting the shape your ex had in your life, and the super boring phase of waiting for that time to pass. This work was made at the tail end of a 9-year period of time when my physical body showed up in my work, along with other people in my life as stand-ins for reenactment. I set up a motion sensor camera on my bedroom ceiling. They use these primarily for hunting wildlife, and when the camera senses movement, it takes a photo with flash on 35mm color film. You're looking at 3 of those images now. Next to me is a life-size silhouette of a person laying on their side. This was silk screened onto a bed sheet. And over the course of about 30 to 60 days, I would embroider over the silhouette, slowly erasing the figure. This is the finished installation. The viewer had to stand in between the pieces to look at the images. Because of the graininess of the 35mm film, the flash, and the thickness of the thread, it really did look like the figure was being erased in the images. I was ruminating on surveillance, autonomy in private spaces, the unconscious and what it's doing while we sleep, and the documentation of vulnerability. At the time, I was using personal experiences where I maintained the least amount of control as a starting point. For example, if I felt like there was tension or competition in a friendship that kept us from being closer, I was making photographs as a way to gain ownership over the tension and discomfort that these experiences then created. I'd like to present a little time warp and small cross-section of how my interdisciplinary and varied practice has grown and has always been. In 2006, I learned how to silkscreen repeat yardage on fabric as a resident of the Fabric Workshop and Museum in Philadelphia. You can see me there on the lower left. In 2008, I photographed the eroding New Jersey landscape in the Meadowlands on a grant-funded project for scientists and artists. I moved to Philadelphia in 2012, got a studio, and joined Vox Populi Artist Collective. And this is where I began to understand social practice as a practice and benefit from the structures and networks created inside a circle of artists. In 2013, I self-published my first book, Razor Thin Rock Hard, 31 images in a hardbound, hand-bound book. In 2015, I published my second book, Belt and Brace, using the architecture and general lawlessness of Philadelphia as a backdrop. You can see that here on the right, literally just random explosions in Philadelphia on the street. I wanted this moment in this talk to serve less like a resume and more as a way to illustrate the path my work has taken. And the path my work has taken has been affected most by forces outside the studio: relationships, geographical space, communities, conversation, and direct experiences. The first site-specific installation I want to talk about is called To Skip to Gloss from 2017. The gallery had two entrances, seen here. Through the use of lighting and a temporary wall that I built, the gallery was bisected into a dark and light half. And in this way, the viewer was immediately implicated. Choosing a side determined the way you would come to understand the meaning of the exhibit. Also note that depending on which entrance you used, half of the show would remain hidden until you chose a path. In the light half of the gallery, a long line of color photographs depicted a wall in various states of construction and demolition. Although the images are in a line, conveying that there is a place to start, the sequence is completely out of order. These were about 10 by 13 framed images, no glass, and there were 26 images radiating from this corner. These photographs depicted two sides of a wall. One side was painted black, and one side was white with a black door that appeared to lead nowhere. The whole structure looked like a portal. As the wall is torn down, we see the underlying supports, beams, back to front, doorways and doors in different states of opening and closing. The body, although not pictured, tears down and builds this wall. We're going to jump back in time to 2015 for a moment. When I published that first book in 2013, I started to conceive of each exhibition and publication as interlocked. So for example, the last image in my book might be the first image in the next installation. The wall, which you can see here, not under construction, was from a previous exhibition and was one of those interlocking elements. These two images from this previous exhibition, titled Changing the Tents, was installed in an adjacent room 18 months prior. I had documented the wall as I tore it down and deinstalled the show. The door was locked the entire time the show was open. So these photographs from To Skip to Gloss documented the only time the door was ever open. And during this run of the show, this previous show, people tried so hard to open that door. It had a really delicious glass doorknob on it, and people were wailing on the door. So I had to come in several times and screw the door shut. It was wild. So back to the exhibition. In the light half, a mirror embedded in the wall created a reflection of the image sequence, building an endless loop where the series played in the round, over and over. Of course, you could also see yourself in the mirror in the middle of this endless loop. If you chose to enter the darker half, you would see the images through what looked like tinted glass. You would also see people looking at themselves in what they thought was a mirror, and in this way, you could stand right in front of them and they could still only see themselves. Meditating on issues of surveillance and access, from this vantage point, you knew something those people didn't. It was a two-way mirror, and that put you in some control. If you moved closer to the corner, there was a pedestal with a group of small objects on top. A line of single-sided Q-tips were presented at ear level, suspended on brass wire. As a practice, I collect anomalies, and over 2 years, I collected 13 of these Q-tips. These served as a metaphor. If you could only clean one ear, then you only heard one side of the story. You were half listening, operating on a half-truth. They also served as a contrast and connection to the images. The presence of a body implicated in both, aggressively destroying and delicately touching, points towards trust and doubt, expectations, and habits. For me, this work was about the feeling of looking back at the end of a difficult relationship and seeing that they were never able to see your perspective. The glitches in our natural instinct to trust what we experience firsthand, and the difference between knowing and, quote, skipping over. 2 years later, I installed this piece, Waiting Room, in the same space, same gallery, comprised of over 1,500 laser-cut symbols from acrylic covered in that same two-way mirror film that I used in the previous show, along with 2 pieces of writing and 1 public reading. In my practice, this was a palate cleanse. Personally, I was in the middle of unpacking many, many years of trauma and therapy and the coping mechanisms I developed over the years to deal with those unprocessed experiences. The title, Waiting Room, referred to the psychological waiting room, where you can see the patterns you want to break, but you're still acting out the familiar, unhealed version of yourself. Using a digitally hand-drawn infinity symbol as a starting point, I created over 20 variations, slowly erasing pieces of the original drawing on the computer before each batch was then laser cut. The shapes also look like many other kinds of things we used to see. Glasses, eyes, binoculars, an hourglass on its side. Like being inside a camera, there was a prism effect, like a reflection nesting doll where you can see through the pieces and behind them all at once. I remember a fellow photographer friend saying, "I thought you said this wasn't about photography." Light from the symbols would spill out from the edges of the gallery and bounced off the floor and ceiling, creating a disorienting visual effect. The experience prompted the viewer to think about the reflective loop and how mirrors function both externally and internally. At the time, I had curated writer Ann Carson into a separate project, and after I told her about the show, I, of course, asked her what to call it. She said 7 or 8, so I chose to cover the mystical properties of those 2 numbers in the first writing piece. The second writing is a poetic narrative in response to Sigmund Freud's psychoanalytic theories on the pleasure principle and repetition compulsion. The research I did on those theories was the catalyst for this exhibition. The pleasure principle outlines a structure where some people seek pleasure from healthy events and some from unhealthy events, through no fault of their own, and based on the kinds of trauma present in their early development. There is not a single complete symbol in the exhibition which is meant to illustrate the breaking of that cycle. Speaking of breaking, I always like to take a moment to acknowledge all of the thousands of ways I did not succeed, like terrible tools, dropped projects, materials, things that were ripped and melted and blurry, and just bad ideas. I think failure is the most important part of making art, and it actually has a higher value in the larger timeline than the successes. Moving through these failures for me and choosing to move on is the only way I'm able to participate in this talk and present a kind of highlight reel, outside of those failures. Now that we've moved closer to one another, we understand each other a little better, we can talk about possible realities and the systems that seek to undermine them. During the pandemic, temporarily and partially free from the demands of capitalism, I developed a process of embroidery and translation from image to thread. I'll explain the process in a moment. One of my first pieces is on the left. I experimented with showing the photograph alongside the textile piece. Every photograph I take becomes part of my personal archive, and much like an archive, the meaning of one of my photographs can change over time, for me and for society. I'm thinking now about symbols and signs, deep time, matriarchy, mirages, future selves, doubling, recreation, loops as meditation, contemporary craft, and labor as medium. Starting with research into the history of needlework samplers, this is a wall of samplers from the Folk Art Museum in New Mexico on the left, and a sampler from Mary Ann Wade from 1810 on the right. For those unaware, a sampler was initially a collection of practical stitches. They evolved into decorative art pieces and records of, quote, female education, with origins in Europe during the Renaissance, popping up around the 16th century, and becoming really popular in the 18th and 19th centuries. Samplers made by young women, and I want to emphasize young women ages 8 to 15, were often used to assess their marriageability and shown as testaments to their future domestic proficiency. I want to make space for these very binary and outdated terms in the history of needlework. I believe that gender has always been expansive, but we do not have or use the language that was accurate. Language like this is rooted in bad history and biased record keeping, and we all know that archives are filled with these inaccuracies, and I want to make sure that I acknowledge this particular one. Another point of inspiration is this piece by Peggy Fontenot from 2020 on the left. Self-Assimilation Sampler is the title, and it's made up of 10,000 plus Japanese seed beads, and it's roughly 16 by 20, which was a common size for most samplers. I'm less interested in the heteronormative history of women proving their worthiness with needlework, also in any way, but specifically to a man in service of partnership. I'm more interested in the way women were using symbols and secret motifs to create a picture of their current and future life. You can see some of these icons here on the right. This is a sampler from the Girard collection dated between 1830 and 1860. The artist was not recorded. In many ways, these cloth samplers were the receipts of patriarchy, and in Peggy's work, colonialism. They were the literal and physical output of a society demanding that women prove their worth. This piece is from a body of work and solo exhibition titled Inverse Sampler. This was one of the first pieces I made for that show at the end of 2023. The materials I'm using here are linen, cotton thread, and micro punch needle. These images are made with thousands of little loops. Up close, they almost kind of look like beads. They're made by looking obsessively at a piece of the photograph and slowly translating all of the colors, shadows, and depth from pixel to loop. This show had 10 individual pieces, and they ranged in size from 10 by 15 to 20 by 25. I worked on these blank pages the same way I would create diptychs and triptychs with my images, where they're all talking about a shared concept. For example, this piece includes a flower and what looks like a black hole, but it is an algae pool in a park pond. I photographed both on a particularly bad date hike before the vaccine. They are sharing space with an incredible doorstop made of pieces of newspaper, made by the owner of one of my favorite banh mi shops in Philly, which closed down shortly after I took this photo. All three disappointments, but also cryptic symbols of growth and ingenuity. There are many systems and histories that are embodied in this work. The history of feminism, and specifically the history of textile art that was made in response to each wave of feminism. Samplers are rooted in colonialism and perpetuated by white Europeans throughout history as a mode of formal education. Repetitive patterns and motifs grounded in needlework are also a universal practice, passed down through multiple generations across the world. For example, Palestinians have their own cross-stitch tradition called tatrees. Queer history is filled with the visual and real act of mending. The punch needle process is also similar to bilateral movement, which is used in EMDR therapy to process trauma. And sewing and mending circles were a direct response to patriarchy, one of the only safer places where women could share their thoughts and dreams with other women. I've been ruminating on how in my work now an object exists, then becomes a photograph, then back to an object with new mass and depth. This is a new piece and still in progress. The working title is The Gate. The size of each piece of linen is 38 by 25, so the work is expanding. Similar to photography, I'm looking at the image flipped horizontally and working on the back of each image during the process. You can see what a midpoint for a work may look like from my point of view on the left. This process is very long. Each image takes between 7 hours and 90 plus hours of constant work, physical work. In some ways, this work mimics and then branches out from the act of photographing. It's the art of deep looking back and forth so closely at an image and trying to bring it into another realm. I've long been interested in looking at a point in the loop, imagining a piece of printed material as both the front and the back. These are 2 publications using my photographs from 2014 and 2023 that explore that third space. During my residency, I've also been creating new work and planning for a solo show opening on May 29th at the Houston Center for Photography. You are all invited. This is a test panel for the world's first risograph wallpaper using images of the back of the needlework rocks you saw in the previous slide. This will be one aspect of the exhibition. Much like photography, punch needle, laser cutting, and writing, the riso process is also repetitive, meticulous, and improperly translates marks, images, matter, and ideas. I see this labor as a form of resistance, a way to slow down my thinking and my body and enter a different mode of making. I'm thinking about editing, copying, the interpretation of information, the importance of certain words, and how we talk to each other. In this moment of complete structural collapse, I want to find out, what do we make now? Thank you so much. Here is a list of so many people, incomplete list of just inspirational work, projects, books, and folks. Thank you so much.
Okay, so I'm going to introduce the next artist, Nela Garzón. So Nela Garzón is a multidisciplinary visual artist whose work explores the intersection of traditions, cultural diversity, and acculturation. Born in Bogotá, Colombia, Garzón earned a Bachelor of Visual Arts from the Javariah University. I'm sorry if I didn't. Thank you. I'm sorry if I didn't say it right. But her art has been featured in significant exhibitions in Colombia, including the 41st Salon National de Artistes and the 4th Salon Arte Bidimensional. I'm sorry. In the US, she's also received notable achievements, such as the first award of the Assistance League of Houston show in 2019 and the Lifts grant in 2020, and a sculptural feature at the Museum of Fine Arts Houston in 2022. She also received a Jones Artist Award from the Houston Endowment in 2023 and she has a commissioned work that is permanently installed at the Meow Wolf Houston in 2024. She was also a resident at PAC in 2023. Everyone, please welcome Nela.
Thank you. Okay. So we have covered this. Okay. I wanted to start very light with this image that I did 20 years ago to this year. And this was like the type of paintings I used to do when I was in college and as I graduated. And this was a commission, a friend of mine, like the boyfriend of a friend of mine who lives in Spain, commissioned me because I did a series of pre-Columbian advertisement paintings. And one of the brands I did was Lego, which I titled El Ego, which means the ego. And knowing that he was from Spain, I wanted to pay back the colonialist movement from Spain to Colombia. And I did this painting for him, which he loved. Going less light, let's move to 2007. This was my first political work I did for the 41st Salón Nacional de Artistas in Colombia. And part of what I do, and if you know my work or not, is trying to talk about the importance of cultural diversity, the importance of how, like, let's say, impositions of power towards someone else's identities affect others. So this piece that I titled Patrioscas, it's like, is the way I try to talk about how stereotypical Colombians are seen from the outsider world. Like being Colombian means when you travel abroad, you're taken out of lines because of being suspect of drug trafficking. The first conversations that you have with people when you travel to other countries is it dangerous there? Is it scary to be there? Things of that sort. So I thought like, okay, as we're seen as criminals by default, then maybe I should change the crafts of my country using a stolen craft that would be this Russian craft, the nesting dolls, and do my own craft that would be shaped as bullets. And I did it in collaboration with a prisoner of a high security jail in Colombia. He was a lathe worker and he shaped the bullets for me and I painted them with the, let's say, characters that throughout our history were known either as martyrs, they died out of violence, or politicians that were known as to be like shady in some sort of way. So the first bullet, that is the smallest one, is a 9mm bullet, and it's the Simón Bolívar, the known liberator from our independence, which people admire, but as well, it's shadily known that he was also a racist towards indigenous people. So it's this part of history that we keep on discovering, or I have kept on discovering as I research through my work. Also, this was another part of the series that, in opposition of being done by a high security prisoner, I collaborated with an artisan. While I was in college, it started to bother me how institutional places of education consider themselves above other knowledge or other sources of knowledge. So I was always, let's say, trying to rebelliously think why it's why are crafts not considered as fine art? Why is this less valuable than this other? So, well, I collaborated with an artisan from a crafty town called Ráquira in Colombia. He shaped the bullets in clay, and I did this. This was called balas perdidas, like ricochet, is my version of bootleg, of the bootleg craft of Patrioscas, because in all criminal towns, there should be bootleg of the original version of it. This was another series of that. There were bombs, also crafted by the artisan, Luis Rodriguez from that town. And this was a later version I did once I moved in the States with the same bullets that this crafter had done for me. And it was the stereotypical Hollywood sort of way of seeing criminals, right? So there's the drug lord, the serial killer, the hitman, you know, that sort of thing. Now jumping much forward, This is a series I did that was called Employee of the Month. I did this out of a project that I titled Hamburger World back in 2018. I completed the project and I showed it one time here in Houston. And it was like a fictional diner that I created in my brain to talk about how imperialistic United States get all over the world, inside of the US, who works in these diners, who are these people that are uniform doing everything for us or working in different places. And this would be the setup for the employee of the month of this place called Hamburger World. So they are portraits of fictional people coming from ethnic minorities from around the world, and they have uniforms from this place, and their name tag, it's an Americanized way, like Gabe instead of, or Elena instead of Oluna, if they are from Nordic places, because this is something that I've lived while I was working, waiting. As I arrive in Houston, like Asian people would say, just call me John, don't worry about it, because they just are used that people will not make the effort of calling their name. This is the view of the show I had about Hamburger World. So it included these paintings I also did that was like using the hamburger as a symbol of imperialism that travels around the world. So in these paintings, I did like 5 of them. This one on the right was called Hamburguesa Criolla, that represents like the version of a hamburger that would be in my home country. You know, those are characters of the Carnaval de Barranquilla. These are 2 other versions, hambaga from Japan, when it becomes like a sushi sort of hamburger. And this one on the right is called Nia Dinma, which in Igbo, Nigerian language, it means unhappy meal. So it's type of like how this element of the imperialism or colonialism is always present, even through an object, and people don't think about it. Like when McDonald's arrived to Colombia, people in privileged classes are like, yeah, finally we have McDonald's here, when they don't think about how these places are moving aside and taking the opportunities of business of local places. And not only that, it's a loss of culture for everyone when cultures from other places that are invading, you know, some sort of way, and taking instead of giving nutrients, right? So this view is from another project that I titled Made in China. I got to show it at the Institute of Hispanic Culture here in Houston. Shortly during pandemic, sadly, not many people got to see it, but it's a very, very loving project that I did. And as you see there, it included several series, some series of paintings, sculptors, molas that I will show in a second, and also an installation of Made in China toys, because I love toys, as you could see with the Lego thing, and I also fall for the collection and mass consumer guilt as well. So part of what I do is research, get inspired by ethnic minority crafts, try to learn painfully how to do it the way I can, and then translate it into a series of work, not only as to try to talk about this loss of culture that it's happening all over the world, but also I see it myself as kind of like an implicit performance that I'm doing to try to root myself into something that I don't have. So as well, as I had said before, that I have this dichotomy and this internal fight about like the institutional imposition of norm and who has the power to say what's better than other things. So this is one of the molas. They were all done using and depicting mass consumer items made in China fabrics that I found here in Houston. They had the title in Chinese with the help of a friend, and you see, so these ones were sneakers. This one was a drone. This is handmade, and the original craft is done by the Gunadule woman from Colombia and Panama. They are hand stitching these fabrics that they use for their attire. This one is apparel. This one's a sewing machine. There were 15 of them. I'm just showing you a few. It's like it takes like a month or so for me to hand stitch these, but once the project is done, I'm forever done with the making of these crafts. This one smartphone, and then part of that same project, title Made in China. One thing leads to another for me. So as I was doing this molas, I thought like also I should go and let's say hunt for disposed items here in thrift stores, and I collected a series of appliances and toys that I found that had been discarded. And I decided to do this series of sculptures that I titled Idols, which is this idol, how do you say it? Idolitrización, well, okay, idolizing of things that people acquire, and then a new one, or it looks ugly, and then they dispose it over and over. And I wanted to make them look as if they were pre-Columbian idols. And the titles of these ones are in Quechua. This one on the left is Kausaki, and it means co-worker. Charey in Quechua means to trap, to capture. So the left one, it's like a Fisher-Price toy computer. This one is repurposed donut maker. This one on the right is a onion chopper, a hand onion chopper. The other one was like an empty bag for hair things for little girls. And there's more of those, but that's it. This, I put it in that position. It's sort of chronological, but it's the sculptor that was commissioned for the Museum of Fine Arts, and I wanted you to see the relationship between the pre-Columbian iconography or aesthetic with what I wanted to do with this, let's say, representation of what I consider a symbol for migration. So I did Mexican free-tailed bat, that it's the bats that live here that have big colonies below the bridges here. And also with the monarch butterfly, that it's a migrating species. And the elements I added to it were inspired by the metal smithing from pre-Columbian people from Colombia, like the Tairona people, as also the bat or vampire bat. It's very prominent figure in our culture. So the title is Pre-Columbian and Looted Bat. You know, this was done in parallel to a gold show that happened at the Museum of Fine Arts. And I thought like, oh, well, I'll use this because it's sort of like made me feel weird that the majority of that collection of gold pieces that they were showing at the Museum of Fine Arts belonged to private collectors. And I'm like, well, give us our gold back, right? So this is a piece that was not unlooted, and it has these pieces of gold and orfebrery that I got inspired by those pieces from the Tairona people. This is 2 views from a show and project that I titled Not One of Us. The left one was in Lubbock, 2023. The right one was at the beginning of this year. I got to finally show it in Houston. It includes a series of tapestries that are a tribute to migrants and refugees from all over the world. I titled the series Runners as the dual way of talking about refugees and migrants as links that connect all places from all over the world. You know, they bring us their culture, they bring us their knowledge and their backgrounds, and runners within a home are the connectors of spaces through hallways as well. It was a total of 10. I'm just gonna show a few of them. Again, it was research-based. I was trying to look up for the migration routes that were more prominent around the world. Of course, it's impossible. There's so much migration and displacement that it's impossible to depict everyone and everything, but I tried to do it because of those important routes that are known. So the left one is Rio Grande. The right one is Pathway to Kangaten, is migration from South Sudan. And I also try to depict ethnic minorities, because within migration, there is different types of displacement. There's displacement from people who have the means to move in an airplane, and there's displacement that it's like, hey, out of having zero resources to move, and sometimes people don't think about it. It's like, why do you move if you couldn't move in a nice way for your children, right? This one on the left is Pathway to Poland, based on the Ukraine problematic with Russia. And all of them have also elements that I'm not gonna go through each of them, but for instance, the left one, it was inspired by Maria Primochenko's work that was destroyed during the bombing, and it's folk art from Ukraine. And it has like symbolism as the bird that is part of the national birds of Ukraine, and also the bird that represents Russia. The right one is Pathway to Rafah Crossing. I did it at the end of last year to be able to include it on the show at Redbot, so that one wasn't shown in Lubbock. This one is called Silk Road, and I did it as trying to remember and be, I don't know, like make sense with the project of Made in China that I had done, because it included paintings of the Muslim minorities in China that at the point were being taken to re-education camps. So I did this one like in homage to those minorities that have been going through that. This depicts two Kazakh girls moving through the tundra, and I also titled it Silk Road because I also like to talk about migration and the problematics of the world towards migration as like, since the Silk Road paths of centuries ago, people were trying to take through trade elements from all over the world to acquire things that they were not theirs. And just because of that extracting of natural resources is one of the biggest reasons for so much migration occurring then and now throughout the world. So that's that. This one is called Deadly Trails, and I put this right doll is a Chancay doll. The Deadly Trails are depicting like migrants that die during their journeys towards the places they are trying to reach. And I depicted them as the Chancay doll, that it's like a funerary doll from a culture from Peru that disappeared centuries ago due to assimilation from the Incas. So this is kind of like what the world is evolving to, like cultures disappear because of trying to adapt, to assimilate, to be accepted. That's what happened. And well, this funerary doll was purchased in eBay by my husband so that I could see easier how to depict the eyes, this which is really weird, you know, like what you can acquire now in these days, present modes, right? This is a view of the PAC Artist Residency and a project that is informing my actual project that I'm doing here at the Craft Center. It was titled Evil Spirits Out, Resistance and Ancestral Medicine. So it included a research about like medicinal plants of the Americas and the colonialist practices around it. This is two of the paintings I did there. The left one is Vine of the Soul. It's representing a myth by the Tucan people of the Colombian Amazon, which says that the ayahuasca, which is a vine, is their medicine. It's the umbilical cord of the world. It goes from the present time under the earth to the beginning of time, which I think is amazing, and it's also true, right? So that is part of what I'm trying to look for, like at this moment, and after researching and reading much about these medicinal plants and these ways of living of ethnic minorities and how the present world, the people in power, I don't know, it's institutions, academy, everything is trying to always impose knowledge upon others. And it's to me like absolutely like, I don't know, insane, like how people don't see the vast loss that causes that. And well, I am trying for the moment just to do more research about it and learn beadwork, to talk about like rituals for self-healing at this moment at the Craft Center, and talk about visionary art as well, which is the art that is created by people while or as outcome of using these medicinal plants. So the right one is called caterpillar cocoon, because peyotl in Nahuatl, that's what it means. It looks like the cocoon of a caterpillar. This one's Things Go Better with Coke. Is about the coca plant and the pesticides used forced by the US government towards my government, Colombia, for 15 years, disregarding whoever was below, disregarding the biodiversity. And on the right is also the coca plant, and it's some collages I did that have the research and information that I gather about the colonialist practices trying to take these medicines away from indigenous people. These two are some sculptures that I did in extension of the idols, but talking about the Mazatec mushrooms and the stone Mayan mushrooms that are depictions of these mushrooms of this of the psilocybin mexicana. You can take my phone. This is the diorama I did for Meow Wolf Houston, if you get to go. This is it. It's called Lost and Sound, and it does reflect what I've been talking about and what I've been working on. It's like a depiction of the Amazon, and it depicts folk creatures from myths of Colombia, and how the devastation of the human consumerism will not prevail, like nature will win eventually, right? And how these myths and folk tales that we hear around sometimes as we are kids, also that tell us about monsters or these legends of kids being taken in the forest. At the end, when I grow up, I see like, oh no, the monster was right, you know, like it takes people who get rid of trees. It takes people in cars with machinery, you know. So, well, that's what this is about, Lost and Sound. This is part of the beadwork I started to do here at the Craft Center. 1 year ago, I had to postpone due to medical issues my residency to this year. And this is the peyote. I use the technique by the Huichol people from Mexico that is glass beads over Campeche wax. It was too time consuming, so I transitioned after returning, and transitioning not only about talking about ancestral medicine, but my own personal uses or rituals that I've encountered for self-healing. So I am doing now drop of flags that are inspired by the crafts from Haitian voodoo practices. These flags used to be embroidered one sequin at a time by the priest of voodoo, trying to think about the Iwa or deity that should embody the flag. And these drop of flags that I'm doing very much are trying to either trap something or trap some sort of ritual for myself for healing or to get rid of something. So the left one is sells evil spirits out. It's sort of like my own way of like getting rid of anything that's bad, and also a criticism toward those colonialist practices of missionaries coming and talking about medicines of others, like if they are satanic practices. When I talk about voodoo, some people are like, oh yeah, that's satanic, that's witchcraftery, right? But no, it's not. Those are the stereotypes that have been said and the negative narratives around it. And the right one, Sawara, it's a word of the Yanomami people of the Amazon. And they say that the shaman is able to see when the white men arrive to the Amazon to extract natural resources from it. The shaman is able to see these white men like if they were morphed, covered in this smog, using hats, and they are the ones that bring illnesses and pandemics there. Devastation. And the other series I'm doing here, it's called Stigmata, and it's a series of plants that have negative connotations throughout history. The left one is mandrake, the right one is the Brugmansia or angel's trumpet, either used in narcotics, medicinal ways by indigenous people, but also have negative narratives given by outsiders. If you have any questions, I'm welcome to answer anything. There's more pieces that I'm working on in my studio if you want afterwards to go check it out. Questions? No? All right. Should I close it? I don't know how to.
Yes. One point your work kind of transitions to more like internal, like self-healing retreat.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit more about
Well, let's say that through my own personal experience, like I was doing this certain work that was kind of heavy political content, that I was trying to talk about this opposing colonialism, opposing negativity about migration, all of these things. And at the end, after going through my experience of being sick, like having to go through medical treatment, I felt like at the end, seriously, I don't know that I'm changing the world through art. It's kind of like a superficial way of thinking, like, oh, I'm doing so much. My work has so much content, that type of thing. And I'm not trying to point at other artists or anything, but I felt it that way, and I felt like, yeah, it is important to say, to inform people, but at the end, I think that the art world and the institutions are not, are exclusionary somehow. Like communities not everyone from the community arrive to those institutions. So at the end, for the first time, I think throughout my practice, I felt like, well, I think to shape this towards a more personal way, and not to talk about me, but something that includes something that I need for the moment. Let's say that.
Just to reshare, we encourage you guys also to visit the artists in their studio after and also ask them more questions in person. I'll quickly introduce Preetika. So Preetika Rajgariah is a queer multidisciplinary artist whose work examines the complicated intersections of cultural and queer identity, nostalgia, and capitalist consumption, while referencing her traditional upbringing as an Indian-born, Texas-raised American. Notable residencies she's attended include the Golden Foundation, the Momentary at Crystal Bridges, the Oxbow School of Art, and the Vermont Studio Center. Performances at the Asia Society Texas and Untitled Art Fair Miami, and installations at Women and Their Work and Art League Houston, and also a large-scale public art commission at Rice University have all shaped her multidisciplinary multimedia practice. She received her MFA from the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign and currently lives and works in Houston, Texas. Everyone welcome Preetika.
Thanks, Dee. Okay, if anyone needs to just like stand up, I often need to do that, so I'm gonna do it, and feel free to stand up and stretch and
Hold on.
Yeah, right
Share
there.
that way you can see it.
Perfect.
And then.
Okay, great. Thank you. Yeah, get cozy. We're about to get cozy together. Thank you all for being here today. It's kind of weird and funny because I've gotten so used to doing talks in different places where I'm in a room full of strangers and I don't really like have anything to lose because no one knows me. And right now, the opposite is true. I'm in a room full of like a lot of very close friends and people who I'm in constant kind of conversation with. And so this feels a little formal, but I'm really excited to share kind of a different talk today. I didn't really want to do the traditional artist talk, and you'll see why. And I really wanted to focus on like a real life situation, and I'm already, yeah, it's gonna be great. This is here, and in case you need a hand, I'm just gonna pass it. Y'all are gonna pass it around. And yeah, so it's important for me to say that in the history of my career as an artist, this residency, which I'm so grateful for, will forever go down in my memory as starting the week that my dog passed unexpectedly. And I didn't really know what that was gonna look like. And I've practiced this like 18 times, and I guess it really just doesn't matter. And I've cried with many of you in my studio, and it really doesn't matter how many times you practice grief. So I would like to share today my practice alongside the loss of my best friend, Jet. He's right here. So yeah, he's here and he's like, get your act together, little mama. Get it together. Okay, I am. Okay, at HCC, I'm categorized as a fiber artist, and I want to, and that's probably because I've been working with faux woven yoga mats and sari fabric for a number of years. And I'm starting kind of in 2019 because that is when my interest in globalization and the commodification of culture really naturally kind of navigated me towards a place of personal interest, and that was the billion-dollar yoga industrial complex that occupies the West. And as someone who grew up doing yoga with my uncle in the park in India on like towels or little things like that, I remember feeling a significant culture shock when entering studios here in the States. These images are from a performance I did. This show was in 2019 when I kind of took a conceptual approach to making work about this. This was at Women in Their Work. And I collected like over 90 mats and did this whole performance. The show had photos, videos, and and this performance and a few other things like that. And I collected all these mats from like local Houston and Austin communities. When I started working with mats, Jet was like, I love this material, Mom, because everywhere he had like a bed and a comfy place to be every time we were traveling together or being somewhere together. And truly, if he could come, he came with me and my partner, and where the art took me, he came too. Kind of a little bit of history of the mat. It was created in the 80s. It started off, so not traditional to the rooted practice from South Asia. And it kind of started off as like those rug sticker things that keep rugs in place, to then evolve into like plastic, PVC, rubber destroyers of the planet and Earth. So I thought, what a great place to keep this horrible material out of landfills and off the planet for me to reconstitute it into my work. And this is us setting up the show at Women in Their Work in their old space in 2019. A lot of feedback there. This was a piece in the show that was made up of 250-ish Instagram ads that were kind of fed to me regularly. And all but 3 of the bodies were white bodies. And I thought that there was like an intentional, act of erasure happening, where like South Asian people were fully left out of visibility in the conversation of like this wellness industry that is so rooted in many of our Eastern practices as a whole. So again, this show was like my conceptual approach. I ended up taking these and using them as stencils to create these like meditative drawings in which I purposefully used brown tones to kind of uplift the brown that was missing in all of the ads. These are all framed in the Asher Gallery on the way out, if you want to take a look. A little plug. So then I moved back I took the show down at Women in Their Work. This is beginning of 2020. And I had all my mats. And I was experiencing at that time, like I had put on 3 solos back to back in 2019. That were all kind of object based, and I was missing painting. I have a foundation in drawing and painting, and I really, I wanted to get back into it. And I was like, oh, okay, this like grid structure looks like a canvas. I'm gonna put it on the stretcher bars. And Jet was like, Mom, you don't need the stretcher bars. You just need the mats. And so this is him letting me know that I didn't need the stretcher bars for the paintings to take shape. When I would Google images so I wanted to challenge this erasure of brown bodies from the yoga practice head on. And when I would Google like Indian people doing yoga or South Asian people doing yoga, I would get stock images like this. This specific gathering was taken from many different angles. And so it was funny because I saw this image of the same people like multiple times. And I was like, cool, I guess I'll start here. So I started here, and it looked kind of like this a lot of the times, where I was trying to figure out if the mats would take the paint, and how also if they would take fabric and how it would stick. I used fabric in my work for a long time, and a number of I had collected fabric from my mom like over the course of years. And I thought, and I always think that like that bringing in of culture, that bringing in of pattern, the bringing in of heritage is important to me, because it's just so part of it's like I'm used to being surrounded by all of those patterns and colors as norm. You know, it's like opposite of Kardashians. So I was like, well, this would be great if this actually worked. And it did. And oh, and I was trying to take, this is 2020, okay? It was 5 years ago. I was trying to take a cool selfie in the studio that I had at the time, and Jet like came and interrupted my selfie while I'm working on that same painting. And then he was like fully declaring that he is the most handsome man of all. And like, this picture I should be documenting is this one and not that one. He made it quite clear. The painting now lives here. This is the daughter of said uncle who I did yoga with, and that's my cousin. And I named it after the park that we used to practice at together. So she was like, I have to have that piece. It's mine. I was like, cool, you got it. You don't want my body in your, cool. Okay, I'll give you this one. So I was not gonna be able to take the stock images on Google for my content. So I immediately kind of, and at the same time, COVID happened and the world shut down. And these text, this was the first matte painting that I made on the left that has my body in it as the brown body that's taking up space. And I decided that like the mat would be a place where I could explore all these different things I was interested in, from self-portraiture to layering in like all these photos that I was constantly taking. I wanted to take agency over the representation of my body. And we're so used to in art history, like men depicting women's bodies. And it's just so avant-garde when a woman like depicts herself. It's wild that that is still the case, but I wanted to explore that. And also because the world was locked down and I was working at an eye doctor's office at the time, I worked through COVID. We only took 2 weeks off the whole time. And so there was a lot of anxiety about like life and death on kind of my day-to-day and in my household. And I needed a place to explore self-preservation and legacy from my cultural lens. The paintings I'm going to show you today, they're all very early, and they specifically nod to these textile pieces that I was working on before hopping over here. So like 2017, 18, while I was in graduate school. So this piece is a sari from my mom that I titled Home Away from Home, and in which I like used a burning tool to burn out the flowers, and it kind of is installed overhead. So that piece, like the making of it, shows up in that painting. And I think it's important, like I grew up, I mean, there's that quote, like, you cannot be what you cannot see. And I think that I make from a space of not having any representation growing up. So I'm fully in like representation mode all the time now. The title of this piece, bottom left, is called Hot Liquids Bring Relief. And though that is true, I did not come up with that, but the Yogi Wellness tea bags are used throughout my work to title my pieces. Almost like 95% of my pieces is not me being so literally like verse. It's capitalism at its best. Another example of a hanging fabric installation on the left, showing up at on a painting in the right with the body. Here's another one. This textile piece is my grandmother's sari. It was called What We Keep, What We Leave. And it shows up in this painting on the left, along with this image from the studio. Piece is titled Trust is the Union of Intelligence and Integrity. One more, this fabric piece has, you can't really see it, but it has the word foreigner kind of like traced out and falling out of that swatch. Appears in this piece with the fruit stand. And that's how that ass ended up. And after making all of those pieces in 2020 and more, my partner and I spent some time at Galveston Artist Residency for a short project, and Jet went with us. And there was this book there, and I thought that this moment was just really interesting. And so I included it. How can art help to shed light on the commonalities between seemingly irreconcilable viewpoints on human-animal relations? And there's Jet as a horse. All the artists in the room, I hope you guys appreciate this moment. I documented Jet as a Damien Hirst artwork with our table. And this is true high art. I love it so much. We moved after that. So my partner's an artist as well. And I'm gonna keep talking about her in third person like she's not here and like none of y'all know her. But we moved into this, it was basically like a 2-car garage space. And so this was my studio. This is the same studio I'll be returning back to after moving out of Craft Center, which will be in a couple weeks. And my studio's time over the past 5 years has looked a lot like this. And yeah, the gold leaf moment. Jesus Christ. I was like, don't like that. It also sometimes looked like this when Dr. Young's class, Sensorial Queerness from Rice University, came to visit for a studio visit. And Jet provided a lot of sensory relief to all of us as we were all kind of sharing and caring. And it's in going through these photos, this is my feet under the desk. And he was sleeping on them. I realized how intertwined my creativity and my making has been with this other living being that I just didn't even like clock before. Forward, so all those paintings were 2020. We're gonna jump to 2024. And February of last year, I thrifted this gem, this knockoff Gucci suit in Houston. And I saw it and I was like, oh yeah, I have to make a painting with that. And I was exploring the Odalise reclining woman at the time, and I was like, oh, this is great. I'm gonna make my own version. So last fall, October and November, I was at Stoveworks in Tennessee and Chattanooga for residency there, and decided to shoot the piece because I work from selfies and imagery that I take of myself. And I decided to explore this piece there. So we packed up in the car, and this little kangaroo went with us. I used swatches made by, like, specifically hand painted by Indian artists that were used for trade and export with European countries. Many of them, oh yeah, blah blah blah. So I got a lot of these swatches. They were all like legit from the era, from the trade time, because my mom's best friend, her dad worked in the textile industry for like 40 plus years. And so I still use a lot of the things that he gave me, which I feel very blessed to have received. It then became a great like conversation in my mind for this piece to talk about like who is profiting from whose labor. And so I like to think about that a lot in my work. And Jet spends a lot of time thinking about that too. He was around for the formation of this for the seeds of this piece, either playing with his Kong or sleeping, putting in the good vibes. I also wanted this piece to have like a maximalist ceiling to floor outgrowth, kind of. I was in a real like celebratory, energized mood about my work and practice, starting the residency there. The weather was nice, and I started cutting out all of these garlands for the piece. I also started making these overhangings, again, I guess, inspired by this ritual in the Indian marriage ceremony with the bride. These canopy of flowers represents like love and protection for the bride. And so I wanted my reclining woman in the Gucci painting to have the same love and protection. While also, the other thing I worked on a lot in Tennessee was this project that had lived in my head for a long time, and I was finally able to put it together. I took these two iconic things from Eastern and Western cultures that intersected, I think, at a very specific time in my life. I took the yellow brick road from The Wizard of Oz and mashed it with the Parle G cookie, which is a really great nostalgic biscuit, like a tea biscuit that I had growing up. This is the display for Parle G cookies at the Chattanooga Indian store, which I was like, fabulous. They really did a great job. And it's like 5 for $1. Who knows what they're made out of, but they're delicious. And a little bit of that can't kill you. So I put this together and I enlarged the biscuit. I then made a mold and then made a test cast in hydrocal here. So this was all done in Tennessee. And then it was December. So yeah, October, November, I spent there. In December, I moved in here. And unbeknownst to me, I saw this rainbow oil spill on our last morning walk together. And that was a few days later of moving in here. And look, this is right there. That was special. So that happened, and in the course of 12 hours, everything that I had planned for in this residency space fully left my whole mind, heart, body, and I had to figure out what I was gonna do. And so then I will go into that. I decided, I was like, well, this space is gonna force me to do something. I was kind of at a loss. This was a note that I wrote, nothing will ever be the same. And I was gonna title it for an upcoming show. I was gonna use it as a title and I was so excited. And then Jeffrey Gibson released that as a title for his worker show just not too long ago. And I was like, well, there's that. I can't use it now. So I gotta come up with something else. Might be the statement right above that. But I don't really remember a lot of this early time here at the Craft Center. I delve into shadows because I felt like a shadow of myself. And this is a walk that Jet and I took in Tennessee while we were just there. And I recreated this out of my yoga mats. And I love it. I made some more shadow pieces. These are all 10 by 10s. I still have a few in my studio. You're welcome to take a look after this. And for the sense of scale, you can see this was like early in the studio where I was in this zone. I also decided I want to make an installation called Spiral Jetty, and I made all these leashes out of these yoga mats that looked just like Jet's leash. And if there are any curators that are doing a show about grief or sadness, I would love to be considered. I think that should be somewhere, like someone should do a show about that. I also spent a lot of time meeting with friends and loved ones and trying to, again, like use the space generatively and fill it with good energy. A lot of these people are people that you all know, and they're all amazing. And they made me feel less alone. People would come visit and I was just like, great, tell me about how you lost your pet, because I really cannot talk about anything else. And I really found real comfort in that. This top image on the right, not related to Jet, is an image of one morning I was having a really hard time, and this group of like 40 elders from the Jain Temple Association here in Houston came to visit. And I was a little nervous. I was like, oh God, I don't know if they're gonna like connect with like what I'm saying, just generationally, like culturally, whatever. There's all these little things, And they were so, they felt so seen and represented in the materials, in the way that a lot of them have their own yoga practices. And they also were like, yeah, we don't see, all these white people in yoga. Like, they just like really got it from that standpoint. And I loved that. I needed that uplifting moment that day. And it was like really, really special. And they all crammed into my studio, and it was great. So yeah, the first couple months I had brought my stuff back from Tennessee, because literally I went from that residency to this one, and I just started making molds out of my biscuits to work on my road. It was like a meditative thing for me to do. I didn't have to think about it. It just took me out of my mind, and I eventually ended up, getting them all painted, and then also have been exploring how they're going to show up in space. And in real life, they're actually like, there's like a glitter coat on there. So they're real pretty. But I'm like still working on all that, and it's kind of been a good little test space. This painting took on a whole new presence in my studio during the course of this residency. Something I was so thrilled and excited about suddenly became like real heavy to work on, because I went into it with such like great abundant energy, and then all of a sudden all I could see was like Jet not being there while I was working on it. And I got through it, because that's what you tell yourself and that's what you have to do. But I took my time and I luxuriated in the slowness of making a painting and not giving a fuck about anyone's time limit but my own. And so it's like I think time like dragged on and disappeared at the same time, simultaneously, and it was weird. These two images show the process of how the collage happens on the mats. To me, I cut out the fabric or the paint skins in this case, and I was working on getting that whole suit collaged in these flowers. Yeah, so this is like one of the nice photos that they took. This was me for most of the time here at the craft center, just working away at a different section of the jumpsuit that I wanted to, and there's the actual jumpsuit in the back. And then I got through it, which was like amazing, because I never really thought I would get there. And these are just pieces of the piece. And I think that I had to realize that flowers can stand for life cycles and are so tied in with transition and funerals and grieving. that that's how I got through making this piece. Oh, come on. Jeez, Jet. Not cool. Ugh. I also had a ton of scraps for making all these garlands and making all these hanging things, and I can't throw stuff away like that. I like for my practice to feed itself. And so this led me into a place of abstraction for the first time in years. And so I think that abstraction turned out to be a place where I didn't have to, where I could literally like internally disassociate, and the fragmentation that I felt inside took shape as these tablets that I've been making. I like using the word tablets because to me, tablet has many different entry points. Of course, we think about tech and the tablets, like a technology tablet, but I think also that assembling these feels like assembling a language like codex or like a hieroglyphic tablet that you put language onto. Tablets are also prescriptive, of course, and the colors and textures really like get me excited. These feel, I work really intuitively anyway, but I was able to activate my intuition in a different zone than I had. And it's a very different muscle to exercise. And even as like an artist, sometimes you're like, oh, abstraction, like whatever, anyone can do that. And like, that's not true. So it's been a really good like self-challenging moment to put these little, they're like 24 by 24 squares, tiles. I fed myself really well while here at the craft center, and that is worth noting, I think, because that takes a lot of work. And since I was healing while being here, I decided to show you guys that I was so proud of my lunches that I made. And I made my first chia like pudding thing, and I've been addicted to those ever since, and I've been really proud of that. So yay me. I also did a lot of audiobooking while being here, and specifically trying to figure out how I was feeling with the whole grief thing. And that whole middle row, highly recommend. Highly recommend. And then there's also like, you know, some novel and some other things in there. I'm a big memoir fan, and I liked to get lost in a story when I couldn't handle my own brain. I needed to escape, and I was able to do so in this way. So yeah, this is pretty much it. I've been reflecting on my time in making this talk that I've been here like 6 months. And to me, I feel like I haven't done anything while being here because I'm used to a certain kind of self-productivity, especially when I'm on residency, and especially when I have like been gifted like a space and time. And I think I realized that I've just been picking up pieces of myself this whole time, from like the pieces, the abstract pieces, the tiles being piecemeal, the bricks, the flowers that are collage, like everything has happened in pieces. And I think this whole time I've just been in pieces, literally. And I'm coming to terms with being okay with that. I have felt very possessive of my pain and of my space. It's a weird feeling, and I'm sure that most of you guys, all of you guys, can also hold a candle to that too. I'm sure that I'm definitely not alone in that. Thank you for listening to my love letter to Jet. It felt like I needed to do this for myself. And yeah, thank you for being here. I have cookies in my studio and y'all should take them.